Abraham Kuyper, the prime
Mm.
minister of the Netherlands in the late 19th century. There's a quote of his that I've always loved, and getting back to the point that you made about the Byzantine relationship with the Patriarch of Constantinople, a form of Eastern Caesaro-papism, if you will. Kuyper said this about Christ's relationship with the state and Christ's claim over the earth. He said, "Oh," and I quote, "Oh, no single piece of our mental world is to be hermetically sealed off from the rest. And there is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, 'Mine,'" end quote. And Kuyper is kind of a Protestant contemporary of Leo XIII, who wrote Rerum Novarum, the famous Catholic encyclical about on labor and economics, and who tried to address the tensions between both socialism and capitalism as they existed in the industrializing societies of the late 19th century. Kuyper was a Protestant contemporary of Leo and was trying from his Dutch Reformed perspective to get at the same sort of questions and answers that Leo was and other Catholic theologians. And what he was trying to say was that and I think for yourself and any viewers of our show will understand with that quote that he's saying Christ claims dominion over all things and is sovereign over all things. And the king, the righteous king, the just king of the Middle Ages, the Louis Saint Louis the Ninth of France, and those like him, understood that their kingship was, and I think that's where the concept of in part, and it was probably a little more tortured than this, but that I was going to say something about the divine right of kings, but I'll put that aside for a moment, that their dominion lay under the authority of Christ. That's what ennobled them and deputized them as sovereign monarchs. But that righteous leaders, including those of the early American Republic, understood that they may have been democratically elected as representatives of the people, but their authority lay in the true sovereign, the true monarch, who is Christ. And both Catholic thinkers and Protestant thinkers in the West, and I say those two specifically because the Orthodox influence on the West has been, as you are aware, far different. There is an Orthodox influence, I think, at a subtle level in Western thinking, particularly in the last century, with some of the emigres and refugees of the Russian Revolution who, then made their way into the West and into America, and who, particularly among those who are seeking, the words of those writers like Alexander Schmemann and George Florovsky have found great hearing. And so I think that there is a subtle influence of Eastern Orthodoxy that has sort of started to infuse itself into the West, but we are predominantly in the West of Catholic and Orthodox or Catholic and Protestant origins. Those leaders in the West, we have had leaders in the West who did understand what Kuyper was saying. Perhaps maybe they never had an interaction with him and they never heard those words that I quoted explicitly and word for word, but they understood that also to be true. William Jennings Bryan, who I referenced earlier, certainly would have acknowledged those words. If you had presented Kuyper's quote to him, he would have agreed with it. Al Smith, who ran against Herbert Hoover in the 1928 presidential election on the Democratic ticket, who had been governor of New York and who was famously a Catholic, a staunch Catholic, would have agreed with those words, and he would have agreed with the Catholic social teachings of Leo the 13th and of the popes of his own time. I believe Pius the 11th was the pope at the time that Al Smith ran for president in 1928.